recording this, and the recording does not translate what's written in the chat. So I will be reading those comments or questions in the chat, and so they're in the record so that people that watch this later on, or if you want to share this with your colleagues that couldn't make this session to watch it and to get the update, we can hear all those questions as well. So we can use the chat feature, and if you want, you can raise your hand. So if you hover under the participant list, hover over your name, and there'll be a little hand that shows up. If you click on that hand, that gives an indication to me that you would like to ask a question. And then when there's a time, we'll either, you can unmute yourself and ask your question, or you can, again, use the chat to do that. So that's our brief update or housekeeping. So why don't we go ahead and turn the time over to Eric? I think we'll start with you, Eric, or Jason?
No, I just finished up a phone call, so I'm ready to go. I missed your whole entire boring introduction, so thank you for that.
Good for you. All right, so we'll turn it over to Eric.
Welcome, folks. Thanks for giving us some time today. We're going to do a quick legislative update. I have a list that I'm going to talk from, and then Jason is going to join in and add to it. I don't know if Chantel's going to make it today. She might still be stuck in the state admin committee, but if she does, she'll jump in too. Let's start with undrafted and unintroduced bill that's going to address public records lists and remote meetings. If you recall back from district meetings even as much as 3 years ago, we were talking about trying to fix a problem in previous legislation that made the release of a public document that could contain a list of information. The statute was amended in 2015 to make the release with contact information a misdemeanor offense, and that the public person distributing the list was subject to that offense. Well, let me put it in context. Somebody can come to your county and ask for a list of your septic permit holders in the county, and that list likely will have information like name and address. And if your staffer releases that list, they're subject, which is clearly a public document, they are subject to prosecution under the current law. The intent of the current law, as we understood it, was that you shouldn't be able to be used, you shouldn't be able to be captured on a public list and have that distributed and used for commercial or political purposes. But they accidentally put the punishment and the enforcement provision on the staff person releasing the list. We have a bill that's going to change that, and it clarifies that it's the commercial or political use of what could be publicly distributed list that is prohibited. And because we're opening up that section of code, it provided us an opportunity to clarify that remote public meetings, like many of you have been doing during this pandemic, would be authorized. They're currently authorized because we got an Attorney General letter of advice in the middle of a pandemic that gave some best practice recommendations for how to hold remote meetings. So we would like to codify that just so there's no ambiguity about local government's ability to hold meetings remotely and under what circumstances they could do that remotely. And because both of those two sections are opened up, it provides for a little clarity on what you can charge when people are making claims or demands for copies of public documents, and to standardize what that rate would be. There's some litigation that's in a couple of cities and maybe a couple of counties right now about what should be released, how it could be released, and what charges could be associated with the release. For example, documents that might require redaction. So either a county attorney would have to spend some time going through and blotting out information that's not releasable to make sure that the information that is releasable can get released in a meaningful manner. So the bill is going to be sponsored by Representative Fitzgerald, and it hasn't hit yet. It's in final drafting, and when that does come out, we'll get it to a wider audience to make sure everybody knows that it's coming and what it does. The final draft I've seen, or what likely will be the introduced draft I've seen, and we have been working on this for a couple of years, namely the General Counsel for League of Cities and Towns was working with the Newspaper Association to come up with something that everybody liked. Towards the later stages, just in advance of this legislative session, it appears that the Newspaper Association has pulled out of those conversations, and whether they like it or not, we're going to move it forward because it does clarify the three things that we're concerned about: remote meetings, public records and distribution lists, and costs associated with making those copies. I wish I had a number to cite for you or a draft to share, but it's not ready and it's not in editing, and so there's nothing on paper yet, but I'll keep you posted as that goes along. We have Senate Bill 221 by Senator Gauthier. This is the dissolution of special districts, a MACo bill, trying to address, this is a Lewis and Clark County initiative, trying to address those not very rare circumstances where road associations were converted into dues paying RIDs and then maybe converted into general special districts, or maybe not converted into special districts, but still have maybe some confusing issues with maintenance assessments and improvement assessments. The whole intent of the bill is just to provide a clear way to dissolve those special districts that were old road associations. And it's just the dissolution provision. So we think it's fairly straightforward, and that will have a committee hearing on Monday. That will be, I think, unless Jason corrects me, the last of our MACo bills to come out, and we will have our full slate of bills in play in one way, shape, or form.
Unfortunately, no, we'll have one more that has not, that's in editing right now.
I think you're going to, oh no. Yeah, I beat you on that one. So you're going to have the last. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and you're not going to convince me you didn't know that when you just said that.
I didn't. I totally forgot that you were still messing with that one. Here's a fun one for consideration and discussion. New Representative Steve Galloway has an idea to either, well, at first it was require commissioners who are currently elected at large but residents of a district to be elected from a district and serve as a kind of committee like the legislature representing, and the voters would only vote for you from your district, but then you convene to be that committee of the whole with as many districts represented as you have commissioners, right? And this has been debated and discussed back and forth among our organization for years. And his original goal, and back and forth with Jason and I, both in the halls and by email, was that remember, he's a freshman legislator, but he likes the idea of him coming to Helena with just his constituents in his House district as his main priority, and then being able to do the work of the state, but with a special eye towards his constituency. And he thinks that that same model would be effective for county government. And by the way, we convinced him for a bunch of different reasons why that might be bad, but I think he was still going to try and move something. He was at least interested in moving something forward. I talked to him late yesterday afternoon. Then his new suggestion, and he might be drafting a bill that would allow that to be part of your plan or form of government, which I think, frankly, is a much better option. So if you did the voter review process, or if you engaged in that formal look at what your plan and form of government would be, one option might be to allow for commissioners to be elected from their district and then representing the county at large. Well, I'll wait to see what comes out of it. He's getting short on time. I think he might already be out of time, but if he drafts something like that, that'll definitely be something that catches our interest, and we'll have a conversation about it. We have Senate Bill 193 from Senator Heinbaugh. This is the disposal of tax deed property for less than the appraised value. That had its committee hearing. Gosh, was that this week too, Jason?
It was
Monday or Tuesday. I did that.
It's Tuesday.
And that's still in committee awaiting executive action, correct?
Correct.
I don't see any problems with that. I'm just doing that as an update because it is one of our MACo bills that's currently in play. Senate Bill 212. People that are interested in tax bills and all the different varieties that the legislature are trying to make tax bills provide more clarity and information. Take a look at this one, SB 212. Let's see if I can pull this up. So the intent behind this is Legislative Fiscal Committee, which is a standing operating committee of the legislature. This is the appropriators, both from the House and the Senate side, that meet all the time, essentially have their own staff, and then do things like in the last interim, do an analysis of local government revenue and expenditures. Well, the Legislative Fiscal Committee and a small handful of legislators have become keenly interested in the way that counties and cities have grown in appropriation authority over the years. And in fact, they've started producing charts in the interim that I still haven't gotten my hands on, that are showing, this trend of growth rate increases greater than what the state growth has been over the same time period. For example, I think one of their analysis says that county budgets have grown by in excess of 12%, when the state is grown, and I think they talk about a 4 or 5% normalized growth rate when compared to population and consumer price index. Okay, all that's garbage, in my humble opinion, and they're making that same analysis converted to consumer price index and population adjusted number for property taxes. So on your property tax bill, Senate Bill 212 has this new requirement that says the county treasurer shall include with the written notice information on the change in property taxes levied over the previous 10 years. The information must include the consumer price index adjusted for population, the average annual growth rate of Montana personal income, and property taxes levied by the state, the county seat, and the 5 largest incorporated cities or towns by population within the county. The Department of Revenue shall provide the county treasurers with the consumer price index adjusted for population and the average annual growth rate of Montana personal income. The Department of Administration shall provide the county treasurers the information on property taxes levied. Now, we had a hearing on this bill, and I asked the committee members what they thought that meant, and I asked the sponsor what they thought that meant, and what it would look like to have a property tax bill show a 10-year trend of that information adjusted by consumer price index and population. Nobody knew. Frankly, the sponsor didn't know, but he held up a piece of paper that he said came from the Legislative Fiscal Committee staff that was a bar chart. And on the bar chart, it was Cascade County, City of Great Falls, and the state. And it showed a growth rate in total revenues from the City of Great Falls at somewhere in the neighborhood of 15%. And the growth rate of Cascade County somewhere in the 9% range. And the growth rate for the state of Montana, remember this is only property taxes, the growth rate for the property taxes levied by the state of Montana with a flat line on it. And you know why? Because it's the state school mills that they're talking about. So they're comparing a number that doesn't grow to a number that can grow based on, and it's converted to revenues based on newly taxable valuations, to a number in the city that is a consolidated general fund number. It is it's not even an apples to apples comparison. So we're currently working with the sponsor of that bill to try and understand better what he wants and the clarity that he's interested in providing as a statement and a supplemental to the tax bill. And in fact, we've got a draft amendment that just says Department of Revenue can do this. If they want to attach whatever they want and send to the county treasurers to mail out with a normal tax bill that makes sense, and I did suggest they take out all the CPI adjusted weirdness, because consumer price index and population has nothing to do with property taxes. And I think the committee got that. But that's one of those bills that comes from leadership in the Senate side that somebody thinks it's a great idea, and I'm almost going to assure you that a version of that bill will get out of committee, and we'll have to figure out what we're going to do.
We're hoping to reduce it to the first sentence, and that revenue will send it out.
That's our goal. And part of his testimony, part of the sponsor's testimony was this information is readily available by state agencies, to which I said, fine, then the state can compile it and send it out. We even suggested that it come on the appraisal notice rather than the tax bill, because the state's the one that sends out the appraisal notice. But I also don't want a document going out that's weirdly implying that counties are aggressively raising taxes when the state isn't. That is the intent of the bill. The legislature, or at least a number of them, want the property tax paying public to see them holding a line and you all raising taxes, which is not what is happening. It's not what the graph demonstrated, but that's the narrative behind it. We had a very unpleasant hearing on Senate Bill 214 this week. This is Senator Hertz's tribal tax exemption bill from Lake County. This is the one that every time we try to have a meaningful conversation about what a tribal tax exemption process looks like, there's a lot of opponent testimony, and it's always very heartfelt. But in essence, SB 214 is a bill that says that if you apply for tribal tax exemption, and the current law requires allows that once you apply, you don't pay taxes for a 5-year period pending your application with the federal government. This bill just says that if you time out or are denied, that you have to pay the back taxes. So if you've applied for tribal tax exemption for a piece of property that clearly isn't going to meet the requirements for acceptance into the federal government, and you did it just so you can get a 5-year tax holiday, you have to pay that back. And then it also provides a notice provision for the local government. So if you have multiple repetitive and voluminous number of tribal tax exemptions, the Department of Revenue has to tell you, so you can prepare with either an assumption that those are going to go into tax free status or not. And then it requires notice if they've timed out or been rejected. I'm not sure what's going to happen with that bill, but we had the hearing this week. HB 257, this is in the spirit of all things public health and all authorities public health related are bad. This is Representative Hinkle. And in essence, it prohibits actions that impede a private business, anywhere from Title 7 to Title 50, from resolutions to enforcement to ordinances to regulations. If anything impedes private business operations, you are prohibited from doing it. I'm not sure what this means in terms of actual enforcement on pretty normal and traditional things like restaurant inspections and pool inspections. I think the bill's intent is to say that there are no circumstances where an ordinance, regulation, or resolution can stop a private business from offering its services to the public. So I'm asking the public health professionals what this means for restaurant inspections, failed restaurant inspections, failed sewer systems, failed water systems. If they're held by and used by private or nonprofit entities, it seems to me this bill says that you can't enforce compliance and you can't stop them from serving their customers. So we're going to pay attention to that one. Of note, all the public health related bills, the authority public health related bills, were to have gone to House Business and Labor. I don't know why, but they're all to be re-referred and have been, with the exception of this one. All of them have been re-referred to House Business and Labor for subsequent hearings. The idea was that House Business and Labor was going to take all of the different public health bills, of which I think there are about 8 of them right now, take the good pieces out that they wanted, put them all together in a consolidated bill, and then get them out. This one they let through. And so this is passed the House and will move over to the Senate. It never went to its hearing in House Business and Labor. And I'm not sure why. You can read into it what you want, but it's not part of the rest of the package. Representative Mercer has 2 bills, House Bill 223 and House Bill 428. They're virtually the same, and they deal with compelling law enforcement to hold on immigration and customs enforcement federal detainer request. So if ICE, immigration, says to somebody, to a law enforcement agent who has somebody in their custody or control, that there is a request to hold them for the feds, this bill requires the law enforcement officer to honor the detainer and hold them. In 223, it made it out of the House already, and it's over into the Senate. It's had its hearing in the Senate Judiciary Committee. And I have been trying to work with Representative Mercer to clarify some language and get him in the first part of the bill that says that a law enforcement officer shall arrest and detain. I wanted him to say may arrest and detain. We've had a case that MACo has defended. One of our member counties held a detainee on a immigration federal detainer as requested by the feds. The county was sued. We lost that lawsuit and settled a $30,000 damage claim to the plaintiff because the Montana Constitution found, or Montana Supreme Court found, that we don't have the authority in state statute to hold for federal detainers. So this bill was supposed to be a fix for that. In essence, if you're holding somebody, you have them under arrest, and immigration notifies you that the immigration status is illegal, that you can hold for immigration to come and get them. But Representative Mercer wanted it to be mandatory. And when he did that, it takes away officer discretion. He put a provision in sub 4 of that bill that allowed for the arrestee to provide proof that the detainer was invalid. And I suggested to Representative Mercer that it's really hard for somebody who's arrested to show proof that they're not the person that the federal detainer says should be arrested. So since he wouldn't move shall, he's been more interested after his Senate committee to insert language that would allow reasonable officer discretion. So credible evidence, for example, the person that's with them, the arrestee could provide credible evidence, or law enforcement could do a minuscule amount of investigating and get some credible evidence that the person is not the person that's supposed to be held. And the reason I'm suggesting that is because I wanted law enforcement to have a little bit of discretion and not just a blanket automatic mandatory authority to hold, even if they knew the person wasn't the person that the hold was supposed to be held on. And Representative Mercer has been supportive as of this morning of that small change. His HB 428 is the identical language as 223, except he put a provision in there that provided immunity for state and local governments in the event that there is an arrest that resulted in a civil tort claim against the city, county, or state. That's a good faith effort to address some of our concerns, and in practice probably doesn't do much, because what will end up happening is the plaintiff's attorneys in these cases will just go after the law enforcement officer. So they'll name Officer Jones instead of Cascade County in those cases, and then ultimately it's very likely that defense will be triggered no matter who the insurance company is for the county. So it was a valiant attempt at trying to provide immunity, and it makes it a more uphill battle for it to pass. But I'm not holding my breath that that's going to be at all helpful. House Bill 421, Representative Hinkle. This bill allows first responders, mostly it's first responders, to access the public employees retirement system like you can currently for your volunteer fire folks. And he provides a payment mechanism that counties can, if they choose, divert a portion of their 911 funds to pay for county entity first responders to participate in the public employees retirement system. It presents a pretty significant problem in that the 911 funds are not supposed to be diverted, and if the feds look at this diversion for non-911 reasons, it could jeopardize the state's ability to receive federal grants and dollars for 911 systems. So that's going to be included in our fiscal note analysis. And also, it's a little unclear. I do think that it's voluntary for a county if they had such an entity under their authority to allow them to participate, but it also makes it seem like there could be an entity that could kind of demand the county pay on their behalf. And so I think there's some mechanics that need to be fixed on that bill. I put that on your radar because it's a feel-good bill, and it's been talked about and I think tried in a couple of different circumstances just to allow some benefit for emergency medical first responders to be able to participate in the retirement system. SB 123, Senator Regier. This is that great bill that allows county offices to be located outside of the county seat. That had its hearing on the House side. Remember, it's already through the Senate, so it had its hearing on the House side, and it's pending executive action in House local government. Senate Bill 80 by the same Senator Regier put a durational limit on interlocal agreements. You recall, hopefully, that this one originally had a 5-year limit for all interlocal agreements all across the board. And then we got a chance to talk to Senator Regier and find out what he really wanted. And what he really wanted was a limitation of 5 years on a county and a city entering into an interlocal agreement to exercise extraterritorial jurisdiction. So zoning and planning. And so we added that to his bill. And now this just impacts interlocal agreements for Title 76 extraterritorial jurisdiction, zoning, and planning. And as such, we have supported his bill because we don't want it to have a 5-year automatic renewal or review for all interlocals. Senate Bill 125 by Senator Cuff is the junk vehicle pilot program expansion. This is the one that allows you folks in the counties to use up to 20% of your junk vehicle fund to address mobile homes. We got a 2-year pilot project in the last legislative session, and we hope to continue that so we can continue to work with the interested parties, namely the tow truck drivers, primarily the folks at DEQ, and our counties to see if we can come up with a more permanent source of funding and keep that program rolling. It had its hearing yesterday in House Local Government, and it is pending executive action. And then, Jason, I think it's all yours now.
Yeah, I just note that the SB 125 has already crossed over. That's on the House side now. So, and I think we had a 50-0 vote on that on the Senate side. So anticipate that will be extended unless we get surprised. Senate Bill 154, which was, I'm just going to go through our bills real quick. We had a whole bunch of them hit hearings and or have action in the last 2 weeks. So 154 was the coal gross proceeds tax bill that Bighorn County brought by resolution. That got out of committee this morning. The industry, ourselves, oil, gas, and coal counties all were supportive of it. MEIC opposed it. Most of their opposition testimony was based on just coal in general. But then they did follow up with 4 amendments to the bill that they wanted put on it. They got that to Senator Podmakowski, and they tried to put those on this morning. We resisted those amendments. A couple of reasons. One of them would have made it so that if Bighorn County entered into an agreement with a coal company to pay the delinquent taxes, there was no way that they could then put them back on the tax rolls if that company didn't make the payments. And right now, if those taxes are delinquent, when they make their budget for the next year, they get to spread those out amongst the rest of the tax base. So that was a deal killer and a bad amendment for the bill. The others were sort of technical. Again, all came from the opponent, MEIC, and we just flat resisted them all. But in the end, it came out of committee this morning on party lines. House Bill 201 was the dispatch city bill, which adds both Sidney and Miles City as dispatch cities on the prevailing wage rate definitions. That came out of committee this morning as well. Definition of bison, which was Garfield County's resolution, came out of committee last night. One of the things I want to clarify, in case any of you are asked about that bill, within the bill, we moved 2 items. We moved it couldn't be owned by a person. If it was, then it was no longer wild. And we moved one other piece, which was related to captivity. Both of those items are already in the statute in the definition of wild bison. The only thing we added was that if you've paid per capita fees on the bison, then they're no longer wild. And there was some confusion amongst the opponents, or at least in my mind, amongst the opponents of that we were adding all 3 of those items to the statutory language. And in essence, no, we're adding one piece to it. The reservations, tribal members are exempt from paying per capita. So it, in my mind, has no impact on them. So we're going to try and do a better job of clarifying that in our testimony on the other side. But if any of you are asked, we moved 2 of the pieces to consolidate all 3. And in doing that, brought a bunch of questions about what a person was and what captivity meant when those 2 things are already in the statute. House Bill 220, Representative Putnam, who's a freshman legislator out of the Flathead, carried that on our behalf. It is allowing the federal payments to go to special districts. This is the Prairie County PILT bill that will allow you to form a special district, request that the state send your federal minimum royalty payments to there, your SRS payments to there, which will then not be deducted from your PILT payment as a prior year payment. So we got it out of hearing on a unanimous voice vote. When it hit the floor, I think it got tied up with some controversy over what special districts, what it would look like, and some confusion. And our sponsor was out with COVID and doing it remotely, and we ended up getting it passed, but not nearly on the margin that I thought it would. But it's moving to the other side. That will be that's up for its second hearing in the Senate on the 24th. House Bill 268 was a cleanup bill for Dawson County, which will allow Special Improvement District operational costs on water and wastewater systems to be put on the tax bill versus the way they have to do it now, which is to bill it separately on a monthly bill or a quarterly bill. Adds administrative costs to their sewer system that they have out in West Glendive. House Bill 346, we had a hearing this week on it in energy on the House side. Representative Welch is carrying that. Beaverhead County brought it forward. It's pending EA. We expect an amendment. The way we worded it, we thought we had protected any existing facilities. We didn't think we were really impacting anybody in their tax code or raising taxes on any solar facilities. The solar folks had a different opinion. Rather than fight them on it, we just changed the way we're going to clarify it and end up doing the same thing, but in a different manner that, in essence, gets rid of about 10 opponents on the bill. I expect they'll do EI on that as soon as that amendment's ready. LC 1199 is the last of our MACo bills that will be ready to go. That was the Daniels County resolution on public land use sustainability. That draft is in edit and will be carried by Senator Lang. Then a few other bills that we're working on. For those of you interested in gravel, Senate Bill 284 is now live. Take a look at that. As it is written right now, it waives all fees related to gravel permits for counties, and it waives mitigation costs for sage grouse. That's our starting point. I expect that we will get pushback from the department based on the aggressiveness of both of those. But in essence, it will, if we can get it through as written, it takes care of all your fees and all your mitigation costs if you're in sage grouse territory. When we did the bison definition bill, there was a companion or another bison bill related to counties that was up, House Bill 302, which was being carried by Representative Cashmere. The base language of the bill required, based on growth policy language, you to deny bison from coming to your counties. We supported all of the bill except for the fact that it was going to make a growth policy regulatory. That is not a rabbit hole we want to go down with growth policies. The sponsor has agreed to amend that out, that requirement that you deny it based on a growth policy language, and revert back to what in essence are two things. One is that you have to certify that you've checked to make sure their brucellosis was free, which means you will review the state veterinarian's report that he's tested them all. And the other thing is that you have to find that it's in the that it's not detrimental to the public health, safety, and welfare of your county. So those will be the two areas where you could look at bison coming into your county and make a decision. Pensions, there's a multitude of pension bills out there. We are in the hallways basically rejecting or opposing all of the existing pension bills that are alive. And we're going to fall back on a pension study bill that Representative Garner has brought, so that we can sit down at a table with all of the players and find real fixes versus one-off. Maybe it fixes it, maybe it doesn't, maybe it hurts local government, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. So we didn't get a seat at the table with any of the bills that are coming forward, and we are resisting them all outside of the study bill. And then lastly, yesterday we stepped in support of Senate Joint Resolution 10, which is asking Congress to allocate some of the energy appropriation from 2021 to carbon capture technologies in coal strip. I think that is all of my list.
Did we get Chantel?
Look.
Let's see her.
I don't either.
It's question and answer time.
Before we get into that, can we talk I wanted to just remind everybody that Midwinter is next Thursday afternoon, Friday, and Saturday morning in Butte. Hope to see you all there.
Do you want to run through our list of confirmed attendees real fast, the highlights?
If you give me a minute when I'm done with the next thing to look it up again.
You don't have to look it up. Just to let folks know, we have the governor confirmed as our featured speaker Friday at lunch. He'll be followed immediately by Senator Daines, who'll be there in person. Congressman Rosendale had to do some rescheduling. We had him sandwiched before the governor, and now he's going to be Saturday morning. I think he'll come on at 10 or 10:30, but he'll be live in person Saturday morning for us. We're still working on agency directors and department heads. We've got a number of them confirmed in time slots. The last three that we're doing a little extended outreach to are corrections, so we can get our old friend Sheriff Gutkin, who we can't call Sheriff Gutkin anymore, to come and talk about how he's going to fix and improve the Department of Corrections. DEQ director, and I'm hoping that we'll get the governor's budget director to come and do a presentation to us as well. But the committee or the conference, as usual, will be legislatively filled and a good introduction for a number of new agency directors and staff at the state. So come if you can.
Top of my head, we have Commerce, Revenue, DNRC confirmed.
Transportation.
I don't think transportation's are they confirmed?
I think so, because they're not on my list to follow up with.
Okay. The other reminder I wanted to put out was the governor's red tape reduction initiative. If you folks have anything to do with regulations, having issues with things related to dealing with state agencies, etc., get us one paragraph that explains the problem, one paragraph that explains what you think the solution would look like, and we will get that to the governor's office. Now we can do Q&A.
Before we get going on the question and answer, I just wanted to, I'm responding in the chat. I put in a section of the code, and this is regarding the comments you're making about the legislator that was interested in changing the election for commissioners and their representation. And I think it's already an option. So just a little context, in 7-3-111, it's the recipe for the county elected official form of government. And it defines a default, the default form of government that most all of you are operating under, unless you have had an affirmative change by your electorate. You operate by the defaults that are identified in 7-3-111. But through the voter review process, they could propose, the study commissioners could propose any one of those 3 or 4 options. Right now, the default is number 3, but any 4 of those options are available. And so I guess that's something that you can either communicate back to that legislator, is that it is already existing in law that they can make those changes, unless those options are beyond or not consistent with what he desires. Hopefully that explanation made sense.
Dan, I think it did, and I was going to go back and do that cross-reference, because the elected county official form of government prescribes that your commissioners have to be, is it in that sub-3 set? And that's what I think he wants to add. Instead of adopting an alternative form to go to the commission form, which everybody confusingly thinks is our default, I think he wants to add that in the ECOF sub-option for commissioners.
Okay. Yeah.
But yes, it helps, because it's essentially the same path that we took when we had legislation last session to allow for, without adopting an alternative form, going to nonpartisan elections. So you add it to the menu list of ECOF allowables.
Yeah, that would be an interesting conversation to continue having, to see how that would look without having a minimal impact on the overall law. If that's the surgical approach that he wants to take. Yeah.
What I don't like doing, frankly, is on the 36th legislative day, start having talks with a single legislator about wholesale revisions to the election format for county commissioners. That's not something I'm real comfortable with.
The immediate response is no thanks at this point.
All right. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, what other questions, comments that you have for our illustrious panel?
If I don't see any, I'm going to spur some of you on. Like I see Chris Lounsbury there from Missoula County. Maybe he wants to talk about the attempt to repeal local option gas tax.
Sure, Eric. So it appears that because Missoula is the only one doing it, the state doesn't like it. I'm shocked. That's the case. But yeah, so we'll be testifying in opposition. Obviously, we just started it last year, but it's projected to bring in close to $1 million for infrastructure, and we're using it as a match for $13 million in projects that we have going on right now, including the build grant out in the Mullen area and looking at some of the flat projects. So it's super easy to implement, I will say, other than it's a voter approved, but our voters approved it. So we'd like to see it not taken away. One of the, as to the best of my knowledge, the only infrastructure revenue source that we have absent property taxes.
That'll be good testimony. Just for an update, we're going to get, I'm sure we're going to be in a position to oppose that just on a local control basis. And we'll have that confirmed with our executive committee. But even the Contractors Association are going to oppose it because they see it as a source of funding for local infrastructure as well. You'll get some more than just Missoula County opposing this bill. I was a little bit nervous at first, but I'm much more comfortable now that the contractors are coming in that this probably won't get out of committee.
Yeah, that's great news, Eric. I know we have a few folks who are active in the Friends group here that got it passed in Missoula from the contracting world that are planning on testifying. But if the association's doing it, that'll be even better.
Other questions, comments, legislative concerns, anything?
Eric, this is Bob Lee.
Hi.
We got a question regarding the bill that was just signed by the governor regarding that guns. Our local librarian is wondering, can she prohibit guns from being taken into the library?
No. No, she can't. And we'll look at that more in detail. In fact, I think Mackenzie probably has the white paper already drafted because we were expecting both with the last voter referendum and the slew of gun bills that we'll have to do a re-education on what can and can't happen. But my short answer in all those scenarios that you're going to give me is no, you can't restrict.
Okay. Thank you.
Eric and Jason, what's the bill number for local option repeal?
Chris, do you remember off the top of your head?
Is it 464?
It is.
Okay. And is that, George, is that the question you had on the, is that what you're referring to as the gas, local option gas? Perfect.
Dan and Eric and Jason, Andy here.
Commissioner.
I did put something in the chat, but can you talk about some of the land use bills? There's some really difficult bills that are coming regarding zoning, as well as significant changes to the Subdivision and Planning Act, right? And
yes, thank you, Commissioner.
It would really, really hurt some of the work that we're doing out there. And anyway, I'll just stop right there.
So let me do a summary real fast. We are, Tara Depew, as our contract attorney, has been on top of all these. There have been a small handful of pretty bad land use bills that have made it out of committee and seem to have a lot of support from leadership, especially on the Senate side. Commissioner Hunthausen, the ones that you're more concerned about are the pending zoning onslaught that we're going to have this next week. And there are a handful of bills that do everything from retroactively repeal any zoning implementation or changes during the pandemic. This is targeted particularly at Lewis and Clark County, who zoned a legislator's ranch and she doesn't like it. And so she wants it repealed and overturned. There are a bunch of those Part 2 zoning restriction bills that are coming out, and we're opposing all of them for all the great reasons that you know that we should oppose them. But we're trying to find a way between Jason and I and Tara to get some responsible Republican leadership on the Senate side. If there needs to be reasonable changes to zoning, to get behind a reasonable bill and help kill all the rest of them. I'm not sure we're going to be successful because the intent of this package of zoning bills is to essentially gut local government's ability to do any kind of proactive, large scale, regionalized, legitimate zoning activity under the presumption that all zoning is bad. And, even I talk to the realtors and the builders, and they're not that far. Predictability with zoning provides some economic opportunity for the builders and realtors. So they're not opposed to zoning in the way that it seems like a group of legislators are. But frankly, I don't know what we're going to be able to kill and what we're not going to be able to kill.
Well, and unfortunately, although they're not that far off of us, they're stepping up in favor of all of these. So the rhetoric in the halls and in the committee meetings is local government is just standing up and opposing this and wanting them to be the regulator. And private sector is saying it's not working, and who's the obstructionist? And that's the rhetoric we're facing. And so I'm trying to step myself in between that and say, we want to be helpful in a reasonable way. What can we do to stop the freight train, which is all of these bills?
Commissioner Hunthausen, if you have any suggestions for how we can kill the flurry of bills that are coming, my ears are wide open.
And I don't know, it's a tough scene up there. I think you've described it well, that there's a lot of support that's, from my perspective, uninformed or maybe even ignorant, about what really happens on the ground out here and what we've gone through to get to where we are. And yeah, personal stuff really getting in the way of some of this. But I'm in fear, the zoning is one thing, but the Subdivision and Platting Act, if some of these things happen where, I mean, you're really going through a process that doesn't mean anything when you go through a subdivision process. It's why do we even have it if we're not really going to review anything, or we can't review anything, or you have to do outrageous things to even have basic mitigations on the ground or expectations of folks. So I think as counties, we're going to see a lot of garbage being produced. If these things all pass, you're going to see just kind of free for all. And in some counties, maybe that doesn't matter, but for us, and I think some of the growth counties for sure, you see outside of your main city, your main hub, we're seeing in the Helena Valley, I've seen in Gallatin County, Missoula, all over, that when you just let it happen, it just is haphazard. There's no organization to it. There's no, we have more people in the Helena Valley now than we have in the city of Helena, and without real management tools on the ground to help guide that or provide predictability, those kinds of things. And so when you try to do anything that says, let's have some standards or growth patterns that work, or, how are we going to do water and sewer after we get to a certain point? And if we don't have any ability to guide that, it's going to be really bad for counties and cities too. So this is scary to me. It's going to be interesting to see how it goes, but I hope our MACo guys in the Capes here can save us.
We've heard that there has been a pent-up frustration with a bunch of land use bills that have been vetoed in the past, and I think that that's absolutely true. And so everybody that had a great idea in the last 8 years is bringing it forward with some sponsor and leadership and getting these bills through. I'll give you an example. There's the Senate Bill 165, which is an awful bill, in my humble opinion, and MACo opposed it for really good reasons. It takes the DEQ review authority for water and wastewater away from DEQ and gives it to local boards of health, and then puts them responsible for designing and implementing and supervising the construction of systems where DEQ has the technical expertise to be able to do it. The theory behind the bill was that DEQ has been slow and unresponsive to a number of well drillers in the Flathead Valley. And so instead of fixing the issue with DEQ with a new administrator and a new administration, they're dumping that responsibility entirely over to local government. And so our testimony was, you're complaining that, I'm paraphrasing myself, but you're complaining about inconsistencies at DEQ, and your solution is to have 56 different regulations adopted by 56 different boards of health. And that was compelling. And they all went, yeah, that does sound stupid. And then passed it out on a straight party line vote. And then it just got second reading on the Senate yesterday. It's going to pass. And the consequences, I guess, we'll have to deal with. There is another bill coming. You land use folks recall litigation about exempt wells and what it meant to have combined appropriations and what depletion of an aquifer looked like. And there's this, everybody's in this holding pattern right now, because you can still have exempt wells under given circumstances, but your limitations are in place, where before it was a free-for-all for every 1 acre tract for exempt wells, right? There's a bill that's going to redefine the exempt well allowability and the combined appropriation definition that was litigated and lost. They're going to reinsert the same language, and then the league and the ag folks are going to sue again, and they'll lose exempt wells because they want to go back to what the definition was before the court struck the definition. it seems short-sighted to me, but I'll venture a nickel that bill passes as well. We will try our best to get as good of a package of land use bills out as we can, but I'm not at all optimistic. And I don't know, Jason, if you're any more optimistic than I am.
Not at this point. I'm really on the search for bills that we could plug our nose at and live with and offer trades where we do not fight them on this bill to trade them to help me kill the most of the worst of the worst. People that are generally pretty receptive to me leaning on them and asking them to vote no are reluctant on these. They've got some pent up anger, and leadership is frankly pushing back pretty hard. They've flipped a vote on us on 165. We need to find some sort of middle ground on some of these and trade them to kill some of the worst of the worst. That's really where we're at as of today.
So, Commissioner Hunthausen, in particular, I want you to look at LC 3041. It's the Senator S draft that's out there, and I'm trying to convince a Helena area representative that this could replace all of her zoning bills. And although you might not like it, it's much different than what her package of proposals are. I'm not saying this is a good bill, but any of you should look at it just to see. It allows for a provision for rescinding zoning in a somewhat planned and coordinated way, which again, I'm not saying is good or bad, but we're trying to pick the best of the worst out there and try and get some support for those.
Yeah, it's awfully frustrating. You were with us obviously, but we already feel like it's an enormous hill to climb to even attempt zoning in your counties. You already have Everest in front of you. And so when you climb Everest and you go that far, and then what we did in this case is we said, that's not good enough. Let's go the extra mile so no one can, let's have extra public meetings. Let's send out letters to everyone in the district. You don't have to do that. Let's do it anyway. Let's have, a year of conversation before we even ask the planning board to take up zoning, those kinds of things. And still, it's like, well, they got this done. How did they get that done? We better put more roadblocks in front of them. So yeah, it's just really difficult. So there's going to be pent up frustration in the other direction, I think, over time. And there's going to, I don't know.
It'll end up in litigation. We'll be litigating everything from conditions of subdivision approval to meaningful public input on subdivision review. I'm not optimistic, but let me finish with this. Those legislators still listen to you elected officials. So in all cases where you have concerns, we'll do what we can, work in the halls and having our official positions. But you, especially on these land use bills, you guys have to reach out to your local senators and representatives and get them to understand that whether leadership tells them it's a good idea or not, that the consequences are borne by counties, and some are going to be worse than others.
Well, and this isn't probably lost on most of you, but the counties are not equipped with the tools that a municipality has to manage highly dense populated areas. And as you were mentioning earlier, Eric, this haphazard development that happens, the cities are less likely to annex those areas because it doesn't quite fit their structure. They're taking on a huge liability when they do that. And so you're stuck with these growing metropolitan-like areas outside of the city, and you're not equipped with the tools like a municipality has to manage that in health, safety, and welfare. It's not what you're designed to do. You're not intended to operate a large, densely populated area. And so it creates that problem, I think. And I don't know if that's appreciated, and maybe you all get it, but I see that with Big Sky, with Lockwood. There's places around that counties are trying to deal with that they just don't have those tools, and the cities are like, we're not interested in taking them on.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're exactly spot on. Anybody have a good note we can end on? I mean, the legislative session hasn't been as horrible as I expected it to be. It even in the last week and a half is starting to seem a little more normal. There's slightly more people in the halls. The legislators are getting harassed a little more regularly like they normally are. They're definitely getting annoyed with transmittal break coming up soon. So it's starting to feel like a legislative session.
So on that note, let's talk about our next meeting, which if we stick to our 2-week schedule, will land right on Friday of transmittal break. We have our conference next week where you'll get an additional update from all of us. When do we want to get together again, and can it not be on the 5th? That's me asking for that without talking to the boss first.
We can adjust those dates on our end. We can easily adjust the dates for these meetings. So just let us know if we need to accommodate. If you feel like, if the commissioners and elected officials feel like you're, from this update, the update you'll get next week at Midwinter Conference, maybe the following week isn't necessary and we can push it out one more week. So 2 weeks after next.
Yeah, so we would either mess up our schedule and go to the 12th as our next meeting, or if we stay, just eliminate the 5th and go to the 19th. Either of those options is fine, I think.
Any commissioners have a preference as we try to be responsive to your interests and needs? Because that's probably, you guys are probably want to be at the Capitol during that transmittal day.
No, we don't want to be anywhere near the Capitol during transmittal break.
It's our only week of saneness.
Yeah, we get 2 days to catch our breath.
So maybe you don't want to be doing this during those 2 days, is what you're saying.
I want him to be disappearing, yes.
Yeah. Well,
Plus,
without objection
illegals-
from,
This is Jim. I think that week is MACo steering committee stuff, National Association.
I think we get into that, the ledge conference is over a 3-week period, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to hit it anywhere in that 3-week period.
Yep.
I think it's just a matter of, do we want to do it on the 12th, which is 2 weeks after the update you'll get next Friday or next Saturday at conference? Or do we want to have a little bit longer break between that and the next one, which would be the 19th, which would be a 3-week interval?
I'm okay with the 12th. I don't have an argument one direction or another. That's when you guys wanted to have a little break, on the 12th? No, you wanted it on the 5th.
Yeah, our next scheduled meeting would be the 5th, and that's during the 2-day break.
Yeah, let's not do it the 5th. Let's go to at least the 12th. That's my thought.
so without objection from the group, we'll move it to the 12th.
Works for me.
Okay.
There's an objection. You can give me a thumbs down on your, I think there's emojis. Yeah.
We'll just readjust our 2 weeks from there. So it'll be the 12th and the 26th and so on.
Okay. So I'll readjust that and send it back out again to you guys. Yeah. Anything else for the good of the order? We're about at the hour mark. Any other questions or comments, suggestions?
Thank you.
Everybody have a good weekend and thanks for participating today.
Y'all done good again.
Well, you guys keep us honest. Thanks, everyone.
You guys stay safe. We'll see you.